Once upon a time, in a kingdom where twilight never faded and the stars whispered secrets to the earth, there ruled a queen unlike any other. The Dusk Queen, Selena, was born in the hush of twilight, her eyes reflecting the deep purples and blues of the ever-setting sun. She wore a crown of moonstone, a gift from the celestial spirits, which allowed her to command the cycle of night and day. With a touch, she could summon the stars or let the sun rise, balancing the world between rest and wakefulness. But beneath her regal grace lay a quiet loneliness. She was bound to the moonstone's power, forever walking the line between light and darkness. On the other side of the kingdom, in the shadowed alleys of the lower city, lived a young thief named Nico, clever, swift, and unseen. He had never believed in the Dusk Queen's magic, until the night he stole her crown. The kingdom of Vespera was a realm caught between day and night, where golden lanterns flickered against violet skies, and fireflies danced above silver rivers. The royal palace loomed over the land like an ethereal dream, its spires woven with vines that bloomed only under the moon's glow. In the bustling city below, markets hummed with merchants selling twilight-colored silks and jars of bottled stardust, while thieves and storytellers wove their own kind of magic in the alleyways. One fateful night, Nico, lured by whispers of fortune, crept into the queen's sanctuary and stole the Moonstone Crown. The moment his fingers brushed its cool surface, the world shuddered. The delicate balance collapsed. Shadows grew restless, stretching farther than they should, and the sun refused to rise. Selena awoke with a gasp, feeling the emptiness where her power had once been. As darkness thickened, she knew she had to find the thief who had stolen her crown before the world was lost to endless night. In the heart of Vespera's lower city, Nico ran. The Moonstone Crown, cool and heavy in his arms, pulsed with a strange energy like a living heartbeat. He had stolen countless treasures before, gilded goblets, silk purses, jeweled rings, but this crown was different. It was not just a prize. It was watching him. Behind him, the sky quivered. The stars, once soft and twinkling, flickered erratically. The streets of the city twisted as if the shadows themselves were shifting. Nico ducked into an alleyway, his breath ragged. He needed to sell the crown before sunrise, except there was no sunrise. The night stretched on unnaturally, and a cold, eerie hush settled over the city. Even the usual midnight revelers had grown uneasy, their laughter dimming into whispers. And then he heard it, a voice, soft yet commanding, weaving through the darkness like a thread of silver. "Return what is not yours, thief." Nico whirled around. At the end of the alley stood a woman unlike any he had ever seen. Her long, dark cloak shimmered with constellations, her silver hair cascading over her shoulders like mist. But it was her eyes that held him in place, deep, endless pools of twilight, filled with sorrow and unyielding strength. The Dusk Queen had found him. Nico's instincts screamed at him to run, but his feet were rooted in place. He had expected palace guards, not this spectral, otherworldly presence. Selena stepped forward, her movements fluid as a ripple over still water. She did not raise her voice. She did not demand. She simply extended her hand. "Give it back." Nico swallowed. "I didn't know it was yours." Her gaze sharpened. "You knew it belonged to someone. You knew it was important." The crown pulsed in his hands. Shadows stretched toward him, not threateningly, but with a quiet, patient weight, as if the night itself was listening. He licked his lips. "And if I don't?" Selena's expression did not change, but the wind stirred, carrying a whisper that made the hairs on his neck rise. "Then the balance will break completely." Nico hesitated. He had spent his whole life stealing from the rich, outsmarting merchants, dodging city guards. But never had he stolen something that felt so alive. "Why don't you just take it?" he asked. A flicker of sadness crossed Selena's face. "Because power stolen cannot simply be taken back. It must be given willingly." For the first time Nico saw it, the weariness in her stance, the weight she carried. The crown was more than magic. It was a burden, and he had no idea what to do with it. Nico sighed, shifting uncomfortably. So what? I just hand it over, and everything goes back to normal. Selena shook her head. If only it were that simple. She lifted her gaze toward the sky, where the stars had begun to flicker erratically, winking in and out of existence. The balance has already started to unravel. You set something into motion, and now you must finish it. Nico stiffened. Finish what? The queen's voice was calm but unyielding. You must return the crown to its rightful place. With me. Nico groaned. You mean I have to go back to the palace? That place is crawling with guards. Selena's lips curved slightly. Oh thief. There are worse things than guards. A chill crept down Nico's spine. As if to prove her point, the wind howled, and the shadows at the edges of the alley writhed. The night itself seemed to shudder. Something was coming. And if they didn't move soon, Nico knew it would find them first. Selena led Nico through winding back streets and hidden paths, places he thought only he knew. But the queen moved as if she had walked them 1,000 times. The city was different now. Buildings loomed taller, their windows dark like watching eyes. The cobblestones beneath their feet seemed to stretch and twist when they weren't looking directly at them. Then suddenly the streets ended. A vast chasm yawned before them, filled with swirling mist. The hollow roads, Selena murmured. Nico took a step back. That's not supposed to be there. She nodded. And yet, here it is. The hollow roads were an old legend, whispered about in hushed tones, a place where lost things wandered. And now, with the balance broken, it had appeared in the heart of the city. Selena turned to him. If you want to fix what you've done, we must cross. Nico swallowed hard. He had spent his life avoiding the unknown, slipping through cracks and shadows. But now the shadows were moving, and there was nowhere left to hide. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, into the mist, into the hollow roads, and into the unknown. The mist swallowed Nico and Selena whole. It curled around their ankles like living tendrils, whispering in voices too soft to understand. The hollow road stretched before them, not a bridge nor a path, but a shifting expanse of pale stone veined with silver. Nico clenched the Moonstone Crown tighter. Every instinct screamed for him to turn back. But he couldn't. The first step felt like stepping into nothingness. The second like walking on glass. The third. A voice slithered through the mist. You are lost. Nico spun around, but Selena merely stood still, her face calm but watchful. The mist thickened, forming hazy figures. They flickered and wavered, distorted, unreal. But as one stepped forward, Nico's breath caught in his throat. It was his mother, or at least something that wore her face. Nico, she whispered, eyes filled with longing. Come home, my son. He hadn't seen her since she died, and yet here she was. The familiar warmth of her voice made his chest tighten. He took an uncertain step forward. Don't, Selena warned sharply. The figure of his mother smiled, a sweet, sad smile, before her face twisted into something wrong, something hungry. Shadows bled from her form, creeping toward him. The hollow roads were testing him. You must not believe what you see, Selena said, stepping closer. They are only echoes of what once was. Nico tore his gaze away, his pulse racing. How do we get through? Selena extended her hand. We hold on to the truth. For the first time he hesitated, then slowly he placed his hand in hers. The mist shrieked, recoiling like a living thing. And just like that, the illusions shattered. They pressed forward, the path solidifying beneath their feet. Nico didn't dare look back. On the other side of the hollow roads, the sky was different, darker, heavier. They had reached the threshold of twilight, the final barrier before the Dusk Queen's palace. But something waited for them there. A towering figure stood before the palace gates, its body woven from pure shadow. Its eyes were empty voids, its fingers long and clawed. It did not speak, did not move. Selena inhaled sharply. The Shadowborn. Nico's throat tightened. That doesn't sound good. They guard what is sacred. She turned to him, her expression grim. And they do not let intruders pass. Nico stepped forward hesitantly. Okay, but we're not intruders. You're the queen, shouldn't they let you through? Selena's expression darkened. I am not the one holding the crown. The moment she said it, the Shadowborn turned its empty gaze toward Nico. He barely had time to react before it lunged. Nico rolled out of the way as the Shadowborn's claws raked across the ground, carving deep, jagged lines into the stone. Selena raised a hand, and darkness twisted around her fingers like silk. You must prove you are worthy, she said. If you run, it will never stop hunting you. Nico's heart pounded. He was no warrior. He was a thief, liar, a survivor. He had spent his whole life running. But this time he couldn't. He looked down at the crown in his hands. It pulsed, as if waiting for him to decide. The Shadowborn struck again. This time, Nico didn't dodge. He stood firm, lifting the Moonstone Crown above his head. A deep, shuddering silence fell. The Shadowborn halted inches away from him, and then slowly it sank to one knee. Selena's breath hitched. You passed the trial. The Shadowborn melted into darkness, vanishing like smoke. Nico exhaled shakily. That was terrifying. Selena looked at him with new eyes. And yet, you did not run. Nico wasn't sure what had just happened, but something inside him felt different. He had spent his whole life in the shadows, but for the first time he had faced them, and he had won. The palace doors creaked open, revealing a vast, moonlit chamber. At its center stood an altar, carved from silver and night glass. Selena turned to Nico. Place the crown where it belongs. Nico hesitated. He had spent years stealing treasures, running from his past, avoiding responsibility. But here he was, holding something that was never meant to be his. Slowly, reverently, he placed the Moonstone Crown on the altar. The moment his fingers left it, the entire room shuddered. A rush of silver light exploded outward, flooding the palace, the city, the sky itself. The air hummed with magic, and for the first time since the crown had been stolen, the world felt whole again. The night sighed. The balance had been restored. Selena turned to him, her gaze filled with quiet gratitude. You did well, Nico. He gave her a small, tired smile. For a thief. For someone who finally chose to stand still. Outside, the horizon glowed with the first hint of dawn. For the first time in years, Nico didn't feel like running. The city of Vespera woke to a sky filled with hues of soft gold and twilight purple, the perfect balance between night and day. The people stirred, unaware of the chaos that had nearly unraveled their world. Nico stood beside Selena at the palace balcony, watching the sunrise. So what now? He asked. Selena smiled. That is up to you. For the first time in his life, Nico realized he had a choice. He could go back to the shadows or he could step into something new. And as the sun kissed the sky, he made his decision. After all, he had spent a lifetime running from the light. Maybe it was time to learn how to stand in it.